Hello and welcome to the first in a series of videos that I'd like to do about the castles of Ireland. I'd like to talk about what exactly a castle is, what we're told it is, who used to live there. Can we really believe the narrative that we've been told about castles? I'd like to take a look at these castles in a logical fashion and analyze whether they could have done these things, built these buildings, or if we can even believe any of the narrative that we're told about these. Long ago, in a land far away, there lived a princess in a castle on a hill, and a valiant knight came and rescued her from the tower of the castle on his white horse. He rode with his hair flowing in the wind and sweat on his brow. These are the stories that we have in our minds when we think about castles. We have been taught to think a certain way about castles. The history narrative tells us that these men could build buildings such as the ones you're about to see in a time when they had little more than a few ropes, maybe a horse or two, a donkey perhaps, but little much else than that. Tools were very primitive, probably wooden, and really not capable of putting together these kind of structures, as we will see. So as we can see from the official plaque of Dunluce Castle, it says, Dunluce Castle, dramatically positioned on the sheer headland between the Giant's Causeway and Portrush, was built between the 15th and 17th centuries. At this time, it was one of the finest castles in the region, and served to control the land and sea routes of North Ulster. Inside the castle you will discover centuries of stories and legends that reveal the turbulent history of the McQuillans, the MacDonalds, and the Scottish settlers who lived in the lost town of Dunluce. If we have learned anything in our short journey, it is that these plaques are written by people who want to either make money from you or steer your mind in a certain direction that fits their narrative about the subject. Yes, it's a nice romantic story. The McQuillans and the MacDonalds having this grand castle protecting the shoreline of Ireland. But let's think about what's happening between the 15th and 17th century. Are the tools available to build these buildings? Let's take a quick look and see what was available between the 15th, 17th century. What events happened? Well, we had the expansion of the printing press, movable type. Then we had Martin Luther coming on the scene, breaking away from the church, creating Protestantism, supposedly. 1520, we had The Freedom of a Christian, which was written by Martin Luther. which apparently the Pope didn't like that. Then we had 1521, the Diet of Worms. This was where they gathered to question the doctrines that Protestantism was creating. The worldwide Jesuit movement converted people to Catholicism, according to this. But then we had 1533. Henry VIII turns to Protestantism. Very convenient that he has a religion to turn to where he doesn't have to do what the Pope's telling him, if you believe the story. 1598, the Edict of Nantes. Protestantism gets recognized officially, apparently, by King Henry VIII. So we're told. 1618, the 30 Years' War happens. Roman Catholic against Protestant. 1642, you have the birth of Isaac Newton and the start of scientism. Not going to go into the details of scientism, but you can see the progression of the steps of this story. And in 1668, we had the birth of Gian Battista Vico. This is the scientific revolution, breaking away from the church, from tradition, from all this stuff. This is the ability to question what you're being taught, that it is a lie, which is exactly what we're doing at the moment. 1696. So here we have Peter the Great westernizing Russia between 1696 and 1725. I'm sorry, guys, for making you sit through that history. I know many of you, and myself included, are very skeptical about history because it is indeed his story. The narrative was given, and it's plain to see the succession of things that happened. Was it the recording of actual events, or is it laying out a narrative for you to have your mind captured within? I would suggest that we make up our own minds and take a look at these time frames, which will indeed tell us that the tools would not have been available. We're talking about a very primitive age, according to the mainstream narrative. An age where things were not even settled. Apparently, people were fighting amongst themselves religiously. Science was just becoming a thing. And I mean true science. I don't mean scientism. We know we're against scientism. But there are some science that is useful to us, where we can build things with it. We can have tractors, we can have vehicles, things like that. Well, in these days, when they supposedly were building these structures, castles, and this is a destroyed castle, even in their narrative it's destroyed, but there are other castles, which we will go into later. Glorious buildings that we would not be able to complete today, even with modern tools, let alone doing it back in the 1500s, where people were apparently wearing loincloths. Maybe not quite that bad, but they were not wearing shoes that were properly made for being on a building site, for one thing. How are they keeping the walls straight? How are they leveling those bricks out? What were they using? Okay, a plumb bob is a pretty easy thing to do, plumb bob, but just to build those structures would require design, a designing platform. You'd have to draw it out. You couldn't just start throwing bricks down and doing it whatever way you wanted to.